Here's the thing about wishing for freedom. When you already have everything that makes life feel full, the universe sometimes grants your wish in the cruelest way possible. It hands you exactly what you asked for, then watches you unravel as you realize just how foolish you were. I'm Sarah, and this is the story of how a single conversation shattered the most meaningful relationship of my life. It left me heartbroken, without a place to stay, and feeling like I had thrown away something priceless for nothing. Ryan and I were that couple. The kind people rolled their eyes at because we just fit, effortlessly. We'd been together for 3 solid years, living in this charming little downtown apartment. We had our own routines, shared quirks, private jokes. My entire online identity revolved around us. Hiking snapshots, concert videos, selfies, and lazy Sunday mornings filled with coffee and crossword puzzles. We were almost obnoxiously content. Or so I believed. Then, slowly, the people around me began to chip away at that belief. It started small. My friends were living lives that looked completely different from mine, lives full of dating drama, unexpected hookups, and spontaneous road trips. My best friend, Emma, especially had a habit of making subtle digs. "You're still so young, Sarah," she'd say. "Don't you think it's weird you've never really explored what's out there?" She'd swipe through dating profiles right next to me, showing off guys she claimed were amazing. And slowly, her words started to echo in my mind long after the conversations ended. It was like she'd planted a thought in me, a tiny seed that grew into something ugly. I started seeing Ryan's consistency not as comfort, but as monotony. Every time he picked the same restaurant, or dozed off halfway through a movie, my mind wandered. What would it be like to be out there, meeting new people, chasing adventure instead of routine? While Emma and the others were raving about spontaneous getaways and wild nights, I was chopping vegetables and prepping meals for the week like a retiree. Without meaning to, I began to distance myself from Ryan. I'd stay out longer, be vague about my whereabouts, and when he asked where I'd been, I'd snap at him, accusing him of being controlling when in truth, he was just trying to stay connected with someone who was emotionally slipping away. I didn't see it like that at the time. All I could feel was how stifled I'd become, how many possibilities were slipping through my fingers. Things reached a tipping point the day I caught myself looking up solo travel experiences, not because I had a destination in mind, but because the idea of escaping everything sounded so intoxicating. Ryan stumbled upon the browser history, and that's when everything began to unravel. He confronted me calmly but seriously, asking if I was unhappy, if I was seeing someone else, or if he simply wasn't enough anymore. I should have been honest in that moment. I should have told him I was confused, overwhelmed, scared of missing out. But I didn't. Instead, I said the worst thing I could have said. I told him I loved him, but I needed space to explore life before settling down. As if he was some kind of barrier standing in the way of my growth, instead of the man who had stood by me, loved me without condition, and built a life with me for 3 years. Then I said it, that we should hit pause. Not end things. Just loosen the reins for a while. I called it a temporary break. Even suggested we open the relationship so I could see what else was out there. I said he could date too. Like that made it fair, as if I hadn't just thrown a grenade into our trust and expected him to hold it with a smile. I can still see the look he gave me. Like I'd turned into someone he didn't know anymore. Like I just casually invited him to be an accomplice in robbing a bank. That look should have warned me I was on the brink of ruining everything. But instead of stopping, I kept going, explaining how it was logical, how it was mature, how it would let me be sure that he was truly the one. I talked about needing to get the curiosity out of my system before committing to forever. He didn't yell. He didn't even flinch. He just went completely still. And that silence cut deeper than any scream would have. Then, in a voice so controlled it scared me, he asked if I truly expected him to stay home, waiting patiently while I dated other men, only to come back once I decided he was good enough to settle down with. His tone didn't rise, but there was something sharp beneath it, a quiet fury wrapped in restraint. And that's when I realized I hadn't just asked for space. I had asked him to abandon his dignity for the sake of my uncertainty. I tried to undo the damage, fumbling over words as I insisted it wasn't about him falling short. I told him it was about me, not wanting to settle down too soon, needing to be absolutely certain we weren't rushing into forever too early. But every sentence only made it worse. Ryan sat there, quietly furious, and pointed out the obvious. There was no us in anything I had suggested. I wasn't including him in this plan. I was essentially asking him to wait patiently while I went out and explored, using him as a backup option if nothing better came along. From there, everything unraveled. Voices were raised. Blame was tossed like a grenade back and forth. He accused me of being self-centered. I snapped that he was trying to control me. The tension kept rising until I finally grabbed my purse and told him I'd be staying at Emma's, at least until he had cooled off enough to have a proper, reasonable conversation. I was so sure he was just being dramatic. That's when he said the words that should have stopped me cold. Don't expect anything to be the same when you come back. But I was so confident in my logic, so sure I was being wise and forward-thinking, that I brushed off his warning with a sigh and walked out, certain he'd come around after thinking it through. Emma's sofa, it turned out, was nothing like our bed. Too small, too lumpy, too unfamiliar. Her enthusiasm for my new beginning barely lasted 48 hours. By the third day, she was making casual remarks about how I should start searching for my own space. And the rest of my so-called support system, they weren't exactly lining up to let a recently single, emotionally fragile woman crash on their couches, especially when they were juggling flings, boyfriends, and limited space. By the fourth day, a heavy silence had settled around me. Ryan hadn't called. He hadn't texted. Not once. My unease grew until I convinced myself to go back and fix things, to sit down like grown-ups, apologize for how I'd handled it all, and find a solution we both could live with. I didn't expect what happened next. When I arrived at our apartment, I reached for my key, and it didn't fit. I jiggled it, tried again, thinking maybe the door was just being stubborn like it sometimes was. But the key wouldn't go in at all. That's when Mrs. Johnson from next door leaned out and mentioned that a locksmith had been by yesterday. My heart dropped into my stomach. He had changed the locks. When I finally managed to reach him on the phone, his voice was calm but cold, formal, almost like he was speaking to a stranger. He told me he'd taken over the lease and my name was being removed. I had until Saturday to collect my belongings. He even gave me a 2-hour window to come by, between 2 and 4, so we wouldn't have to face each other. That was the moment it sank in. I no longer had a home. The man I'd shared a life with for nearly 3 years had completely cut me out in less than a week. The same man I thought would always be there was gone, and just like that, my great plan for experiencing life looked pretty ridiculous from the hallway of an apartment I couldn't even enter. The following weeks blurred into a mess of temporary stays, unanswered messages, and growing anxiety. All those friends who had championed my right to find myself, they disappeared the moment I needed something more than validation. They had tiny apartments, new partners, rules about overnight guests. I was on my own. Eventually, I scraped together enough cash to rent a studio apartment, barely big enough to stretch my arms in. The walls were thin, the heater clanked like it was haunted, and every night I lay there staring at the ceiling, wondering how a single conversation had taken me from comfort and love to complete isolation. But the real gut punch came later. When I returned to pick up the last of my things, Ryan was there. I wasn't prepared to see him, but what stunned me even more was the woman beside him. Her name was Lisa. She was effortlessly pretty, confident, and clearly at home in the space I used to call mine. She had a key. She wore one of his shirts like it was always meant for her. She looked like freedom personified, unpredictable, fun, alive. Everything I claimed I wanted to be. And Ryan, he looked incredible. Happier than I'd seen him in years. At peace, like letting go of me had lifted some invisible weight off his shoulders. He looked like a man who had made the right choice. I tried one last time to fix it, to reach for him, to make him see we still had something worth saving. But the expression on his face wasn't angry, it was sad. Like he was remembering someone he used to love. And then he said it. I loved you too. But not anymore. 6 months have passed. I'm still in that cramped little apartment. Still swiping through dating apps, trying to chase the illusion of something I can't quite define. Meanwhile, Ryan and Lisa are engaged, planning a life together that I once believed was mine. And the cruelest part, they look like everything I thought I needed to go find. The truth? The grass doesn't grow greener on the other side. It's just different. And different can be lonelier. Harder. Sometimes what you're searching for was already in your hands, And by the time you realize that, someone else is living the life you gave up. So if you're thinking about asking for space, for freedom, for time to explore, think carefully. Because sometimes freedom comes at a cost you never expected. And sometimes, by the time you understand the price, it's already far too late to undo the damage.